Hello, my name is Michelle Cordero. I will be presenting my developmental learning design project. This project will discuss how to create an origami structure with different developmental age groups, specifically those in late childhood and early adulthood. This activity will take place in two different locations. The intended learning environment for the children in late childhood will be at an after-school event, while the intended learning environment for the young adults will be a gathering in the evening at the home of a friend. These groups have been separated so as to adapt and accommodate the activity to suit the developmental capabilities of each group. During these activities, we will be focusing on a few specific learning outcomes. Although the two groups differ greatly in many ways, all of the following outcomes can be achieved by adapting the lesson to accommodate the learner. Please pause the presentation now and read the learning and motivation outcomes. It is incredibly important to determine the prior knowledge of the learner. In order to create an origami structure, learners must have refined fine motor skills, as origami requires delicate folds and oftentimes many fingers must be used simultaneously. Learners must be able to follow precise directions in the correct order. If they have difficulty with this, they will not be able to create the origami structure they are trying to make. Finally, learners should have knowledge of certain shapes and certain angles. Prior knowledge assessments can be done in nearly the same way for both groups. First, have learners cut squares, rectangles, and triangles out of sheets of paper. This will not only test their knowledge of shapes, but also their fine motor skills and their ability to follow an ordered set of directions. In order to test their knowledge of angles, the late childhood group will have a worksheet with various angles which they must identify as right, acute, or obtuse. The young adult group will have to draw the angle when called out. Prior knowledge assessments can be done individually or in a group. Now that the learner's prior knowledge has been assessed, the instructor can begin to introduce the learners to the learning activities. At the beginning of the activity for the late childhood learners, the instructor will first lead the learners in practicing several simple folds using scrap paper. The instructor will demonstrate the folds. They will then repeat it with the learner. Then the learner will attempt it by themselves, following the I do, we do, you do concept of learning, thus allowing ample time to practice in order to build confidence in their skills. Once mastered, the learner will watch the instructor create a basic origami jumping frog and crane structure, following the I do, we do, you do method. While learners are practicing on their own, the instructor will be available for assistance. There will also be a three-dimensional computer program depicting all of the steps. This will allow them to practice without feeling rushed or pressured. Learners will have a conversation with each other and the instructor, while they will compare and contrast the different folds they used on each and why they think those folds were necessary. They will then be informed that they are being challenged to use what has been learned to create a new origami structure of their own design. Although the learning environment for the 20-year-old young adults will vary greatly from that of the childhood learners, the activities conducted will be generally similar. The instructor will begin by introducing the concept of origami and describing its health benefits of stress reduction. For young adults, this can be seen as a great benefit because at this point in their lives they are often plagued by stresses they did not previously have. The instructor will first demonstrate the various folds previously stated. As the learning environment can be a bit loud, handouts will be placed on the table with artist depictions of the various folds and directions on how to create the origami structures, which can be used during practice. Learners will be instructed on the same jumping frog and crane structures from the previous group. They will also have a discussion where they compare and contrast the structures and be challenged to create a new structure of their own design. The learning activities described are relatively similar for both groups, with a few minimal changes. Although the age groups of late childhood and young adulthood differ greatly, they are both developmentally able to handle the activities involved. All must learn the proper folds before they can advance on to actually creating an origami structure, and all must practice the steps needed to create the different structures in order to master them. Differences include how the instructor is motivating the group. The motivation being expressed towards the late childhood group is one of just having fun and having a new skill which they can use to impress their friends. When speaking with the group of young adult learners, the motivation expressed should be how origami can give them the ability to clear their mind and relieve stress, as well as enhance their creativity. Another major difference in the learning design for each group includes how the young adults have handouts, while the late childhood group does not. The reasoning for this is partly because of the learning environment. The environment for the late childhood group is in a school during an after-hours event. As this is already an established learning environment, the use of technology which they can control will allow them to choose whether they would like to practice with the instructor or with the use of technology, as they would normally. This group of learners will also have more scaffolding and repetition so they can better master the folds. Given the knowledge we have about developmental stages, we can discern that these activities are both developmentally and cognitively appropriate. Sandrock 2014 noted Piaget's 1952 theory that children of this age were in the concrete operational stage. During this stage, they can reason logically as long as the activities are applied to a specific example. Because of this, learners will be able to follow concrete instructions given, follow the proper steps, and eventually create their own origami structure. Sandrock also mentions Erikson's theory that learners of this age are experiencing industry versus inferiority. During this stage, learners tend to become more interested in how things work and enjoy creating new things. During late childhood, children may have low self-esteem. The learning model of I do, we do, you do helps create mastery, provides emotional support, and helps children achieve, thus improving and encouraging their self-efficacy. The instructional goals can be monitored by the learner and are easily measurable, have a deadline, and include lower and higher levels of thinking. Intrinsic cognitive load is managed by testing prior knowledge and conducting an initial orientation and training of the basic origami folds at the beginning of the activity. Extraneous cognitive load is decreased by making expectations clear and with scaffolding. We can also deduce that these learning activities are cognitively and developmentally appropriate for young adult learners. During this developmental stage, learners are in Piaget's PostFormal Thought stage, defined by more realistic, pragmatic thinking. Here they become reflective, relativistic, and contextual. They are highly influenced by emotion, which can be negative, and origami can relax them. They are in the midst of many transitions and experiences in life and are open to learning new things they feel will benefit them. This is a perfect way to introduce origami. This developmental period is also a time of creativity and it should be nourished. Just as with the late childhood learners, the instructional goals can be monitored by the learner and are easily measurable, have a deadline, and include both lower and higher level thinking skills. These learning tasks, while easily adaptable to a multitude of ages, must also have ways of being assessed. It is important to assess learners in order to determine if the instructional goals were met. For both groups, formative assessments will be conducted verbally, while learners attempt to create the jumping frog and crane origami structures. The instructor will visually examine their progress on both, offering assistance and support when needed. Learners will then verbally list 3 ways in which the jumping frog and crane origami structures are similar and different. This will be conducted in a conversation-style assessment between the group, including the instructor. If learners are having trouble with this assessment, the instructor should probe them in order to assist them in noticing similarities and differences. Both groups will be challenged to create a new origami structure of their own design using what they have learned during the activities. This is the summative assessment, which will put together everything that they have learned. At the completion of the learning activities and assessments, learners will be asked to complete a short questionnaire with Likert-style questions, scaling from 1 to 5, such as, "It is beneficial to create origami." This questionnaire will determine if learners find value in origami after completing these learning activities. The art of origami is a creative and stress-relieving activity which, when done properly, can be adapted to accommodate a wide variety of learners. It is important to be aware of the age demographics of the learners involved so that learning designers can best facilitate the environment so all find value in it and are able to meet their learning goals.